Ahead of the Afghan presidential elections next month, US Marines and British troops launch major new offensives against the Taliban in southern Afghanistan. On the one hand, conventional armies equipped with state-of-the-art technology. On the other, guerrilla fighters, mobile and highly elusive. Two completely different philosophies of warfare, but only one objective: control of the territory. Who's likely to come out on top? This is Inside Story. Welcome to the program. I'm Mariam Namazi. It's just over 10 days since the US launched Operation Khanjar, the first big offensive under US President Barack Obama's new regional strategy to defeat the Taliban and its allies. Also known as Strike of the Sword, it was launched in Lashkargah, the provincial capital of Helmand. The aim of this operation is to drive Taliban out of these areas, to achieve decisive victory on the Taliban and improve security ahead of the upcoming presidential elections in August. The operation includes the support of the British and the Afghan security forces and is likely to last for months rather than weeks. The first 10 days of the mission have been particularly bloody, especially for the British, who've lost 15 soldiers. The British death toll in Afghanistan is now 184, surpassing the number killed in the Iraq campaign. This has created doubts in the UK about the human cost of the war, but British Prime Minister Gordon Brown emphasised that Britain's participation in the war was crucial to domestic safety. So let's now take a look at the actual governance of Afghanistan. Well, the country is divided into provinces or districts, and both the Afghan government and the Taliban seem to exert some level of control in the region. Breaking it down, Taliban are concentrated in the southern tip of the Helmand province, around the districts of Garamsir and Nawa. And according to the Afghan Interior Ministry, the Taliban controls around 11% of the country, whereas the government controls around 30%. The rest of the country, the Interior Ministry says, remains under local tribal control. But according to the British think tank, the International Council on Security and Development, the Taliban controls 72% of Afghanistan, throwing in doubt the new strategy to drive them out of Helmand. Well, joining us today are our guests in London, Michael Griffin, an expert on the Taliban and author of several books on the region, the latest of which is Reaping the Whirlwind, Al-Qaeda and the Holy War. In Kabul, Prince Ali Siraj, a political analyst and president of the National Coalition for Dialogue for the Tribes of Afghanistan. And also joining us from Kabul, our correspondent there, Zaina Khodr. Now, it's worth saying that we did invite the military spokesman for ISAF, the NATO-led security force in Afghanistan, to appear on the show to give their perspective on Operation Khanjar in Helmand province, but they declined our offer. Zaina, if I can begin with you, what have ISAF been saying to you about what they're trying to achieve in Helmand province?
Well, really, their main aim is to clear the territory from the Taliban, establish the government's presence in areas where they haven't been for years, mainly in the southern tip of Helmand. Now, clearing those areas, those districts, will actually allow for voting to take place. We all know that there's a presidential vote in August, and they would like elections to be held there. So this is one of the objectives. We've also been speaking to Afghan government officials who have told us the objective as well is to cut the Taliban's supply lines, because this is a strategic territory for the Taliban, their heartland. And government officials have told us that what they're trying to do is cut their supply routes, taking over, for example, the Baram Shah border crossing. So they're advancing slowly, trying to establish a presence. But really, the long-term goal here is to hold that territory, not just to clear it like previous operations. This is what they tell us. And that's where the challenge lies, because you don't only have to win the support and confidence of the local population and tell them and convince them that their lives will get better. You have to hold that territory. You're going to need local Afghan forces, something we've heard U.S. military commanders complain that they urgently need more local Afghan forces.
Michael Griffin, will recent U.S. reinforcements in Helmand succeed in those objectives, in your opinion?
The United States' original destination was to move south of the Lashkargah provincial capital and to occupy a place at the junction of the River Helmand, where it turns sharply toward the Iranian border, and the supply route north from Pakistan. They've certainly achieved that, and they've achieved that with much fewer casualties than the British have been taken in their positions further north. So what the Americans are doing further south is blocking the retreat of Taliban into Baluchistan on the Pakistan border, and they're also blocking the supply of further weapons and other material from Pakistan, and preventing supplies getting through to the Taliban in Helmand also means they're not going to go through to the Taliban in Kandahar, at least not through this route. So it's a severe disruption of the supply chain. If that was the primary goal of the US deployment south in Helmand province, I think they've achieved that.
Prince Ali, are these goals realistic, in your opinion, of not just clearing the area of Taliban forces, but also holding that area and rebuilding?
Well, for the short-term basis, in order to bring some form of stability in the Helmand area so that the people can go out and vote for August 19th, it is possible that they might be able to succeed. Not 100%, maybe around 50%. But if this is something that they want to do for a long-term basis, they will never be able to hold the areas that they, from where they evict the Taliban. We must not forget that there are three types of Taliban operating inside Afghanistan. You've got what we call the Black Talib. These are the ones that come from foreign countries like Sudan, like Chechnya, like Uzbekistan and Pakistan and other areas. Then these are the ones that are creating most of the problems as far as the suicide bombing is concerned, as far as murders, mayhem, and drug trade, and
Prince
so on
Ali,
and so forth.
I did actually want to ask you about who foreign forces are actually fighting. Let's just listen to what one member of the Taliban has to say about those who are fighting against the government and against foreign troops in Helmand.
All locals are Muslims, and they are with us. They are standing with us in our jihad. It's their responsibility. They fight alongside us and help us, even with money.
Prince Ali, who are the majority of fighters in Helmand? Because we hear about foreign fighters coming from countries like Pakistan, but as that clip we just heard suggests, aren't many of these fighters actually from Helmand itself?
Well, one person does not represent an entire region. Don't forget that in Helmand alone, there are almost 20 different tribes, the largest being the Alizai, and then goes down to Barakzai, and then Achikzai, and Popalzai, and so on down the road. Just because one person makes the statement, I'm not denying the fact that there are certain members of living in Helmand who are probably fighting alongside the Taliban that are coming from outside. But just because he is a Pashtun and he makes the statement, this does not hold true for all people living in that particular area. The people in Helmand are totally sick and tired of fighting. They would like to have peace, but we cannot bring peace by adding more troops. In fact, 2-3 weeks ago, the Taliban put an ad over the internet seeking assistance and seeking recruitment from outside of Afghanistan to come and help save Afghanistan from foreign invaders. This is what I've been trying to say for a long time now. The war, if there is, it's not a war. This is an insurgency inside Afghanistan. To control the insurgency inside Afghanistan, we need a strong police force, and we need the cooperation of all the tribes.
Okay, we'll come to those points a little later on in the program. We will address those issues. But Zaina Khadr, what can you tell us about ordinary people in Helmand? Where does public opinion lie vis-à-vis the Taliban?
Well, we spent approximately a week in Lashkar, which is the provincial capital of Helmand, and we did talk to a number of people there while the operation was underway in the southern tip of the province. And most of them really, they would tell you that the U.S. military, they're infidels, they're invaders, and the very fact that they set up bases in our area would just mean there are more targets, and it will transform our village into a battleground. People there, really, this is the Taliban's heartland, and the way the Taliban operates, really, it's a guerrilla war, and they do have a lot of support among the population. I can tell you, while we were driving out of Lashkar Gah on our way back to Kandahar, we were stuck on a highway, and we saw the Taliban fighters emerge from the villages on the side of the road. They were holding AK-47s. They blocked the highway for 10 hours, and they just emerged from civilian homes, and they set up checkpoints. So they are a part of this population as well.
Michael Griffin, if we look at that issue that Zaina raised about the Taliban tactics, the Taliban obviously can't engage in direct fighting with any unit of NATO troops because they would lose. NATO are much better equipped, so they resort to improvised explosive devices, which can be actually quite effective, can't they, even against heavily armoured vehicles?
Well, particularly against heavily armoured vehicles, the heavier the armour, that all you simply have to do is to develop a stronger IED. They don't come in only one size. You make them as you require, and as you probably know, the IED has been, as a weapon, has been upgraded by technology sweeping in from Iraq and also probably through Iran. So you now have something called a shaped directional IED, which means that instead of simply going boom underneath the vehicle, it can actually shoot almost as effectively as a piece of artillery round and go straight through a Bradley tank. So it's a very, very impressive weapon. Having said that, a mobile, possibly on-the-run group of Taliban do not have the technology to put these together in a hurry and very, very reliably. So if they are on the run as a result of this assault by NATO, then I don't think they're going to be pulling together very, very effective IEDs from now on in. They are going to be disrupted. They're going to be denied access to vehicles. I don't know if you remember, in the British press there were descriptions of Taliban trying to float their trucks across the Helmand to escape up to the west using empty water barrels. So we're looking at a Taliban which is losing a great deal of its mobility, and mobility was one of its great advantages in the insurgency in Helmand over the past 3 years.
Prince Ali, does more effort need to go into finding the bomb makers who design these bombs that are used against foreign forces?
You know, I'm really, I happen to be the only Afghan here among your panel. I'm a prince of Afghanistan. My family ruled Afghanistan for 300 years. There isn't a single tribe in Afghanistan that's not part of my coalition, which is the National Coalition for Dialogue with Tribes of Afghanistan. I hear everybody talking about the Taliban. I hear everybody talking about the IEDs. I hear everybody talking about the fighting and the killing, but nobody's talking about the people of Afghanistan.
Well, we are going to come to that issue about reconstruction and development. But let me ask you this. Is it possible to defeat an enemy that doesn't engage in direct combat?
But the reason the enemy has been created is because the people of Afghanistan, the very people that have defended Afghanistan for 5,000 years, has been totally disregarded and sidelined. Where were the Europeans and the Americans and the NATO forces when we were fighting the Soviet Red Army? And why did we succeed against the Red Army? You know, with very little little weapons.
Okay, but Prince Ali, can I just ask you to answer this specific question? Given the tactics that the Taliban uses, can they be militarily defeated?
No. The tactics that they are using, it's hit and run. The Taliban that are inside Afghanistan, most of them, a majority of quite a large number of them are foreigners. They are like locusts. They go from one province to another province. They go from one district to another district. You don't have enough men on the ground. And even if you were to double, triple, quadruple the number of men on the ground, you're not going to defeat them, because you're not fighting a regular army. You're fighting a bunch of ragtag, barefooted individuals who have come from different parts of the world. They don't have a religious agenda. They do not have a political agenda. They are there just to make money off of the drugs, or just to create problems, and just to fight against the Western forces inside Afghanistan.
Oh, Michael Griffin.
This is going to be a 1,000-year war.
Yes, Michael Griffin, do you agree with Prince Ali's assessment?
No, I think Prince Ali has just given a very good description of what the Taliban are likely to become as a result of this campaign. For example, up until this point, up until July 1st, when this operation was launched, the Taliban operating in Helmand could claim a number of things. They could claim, we represent the voice of the people of Helmand, all 20 tribes that Prince has referred to. We represent the genuine patriotic spirit of Afghanistan, or the Pashtun aspect of Afghanistan. We represent our desire to be free from foreign occupation. All of these things are very impressive. We represent Islam. Now the Prince, and I think the Prince knows what he's talking about, says these guys have no ideological agenda. They do not have a religious position that really withstands much examination. They live off the fat of the land and the intimidation of peasants. They live off the drugs trade, and they live off banditry. Now I think that if we assume that once they lose command of Helmand province, and once they lose the support of the population, and once they lose control of the opium crop in Helmand province, which is part and parcel of this operation, it's separating them from their treasury, then they will become bandits. And bandits have two choices. They either continue to be bandits, moving from province to province, looting where possible, or else they have to melt back into the villages and try to accommodate themselves to a different level of reality, which is a level of peace.
Prince Ali, what's your response to that?
Mr. Griffin is right. I'm happy that somebody concurs with what I've been saying for the last 5 years. But again, please understand, to understand Afghanistan, you must understand the Afghan culture and you must understand the Afghan psyche. Afghanistan is the several nations into one. We have got tribes from Pashtuns, Uzbeks, Tajiks, Hazaras, Arabs, Tartars, you name it, each one living their own way of life. Today, the reason that the Taliban are being able to move freely within the communities is because the community considers themselves as a herd of sheep. They tell me time and time again, they have no idea where to go. They go towards the coalition, the Taliban kill them. They go towards the Taliban, the coalition kills them. Why don't we sit down? I will guarantee you, I represent the people, I represent the tribes. They are ready to sit down with the coalition and with the government to form a team between the tribal elders, between the coalition and between the government to work together as a team instead of each one moving in a different direction. I really to this day do not understand what is the agenda for Afghanistan.
Well, let me put that point to Michael Griffin then. We know what the aims and objectives are. But the fact is there has been very little progress in terms of security in Afghanistan. The Taliban are in control of large swathes of the country, and there's been also little progress in development and reconstruction. So the question is the current strategy working to deal with the state of Afghanistan at this point in time?
Well, before getting on to the bigger question, I'd just simply like to stay in Helmand province for a little while, just to address this issue of security and development. There cannot be security, there cannot be development without security. If you do not have security, you cannot have development. So therefore, let us go into the north of the province to a place called Kajaki. Kajaki is at the headwaters of the Helmand River as it enters the province, and there's a massive hydroelectric dam there. At the beginning of this year, I don't know if you remember, there was a massive operation bringing a huge turbine from Kandahar through enemy country, as it were, across IEDs with, I think, practically every single piece of heavy protective equipment that the NATO allies had to offer to protect this turbine as it went to Kajaki Dam, where it finally was successfully installed but not switched on. If that dam goes on, it will provide electricity to 1.5 million households across the south.
But as you say, the security situation prevents that from happening. According to the British think tank, the International Council on Security and Development, Taliban controls 72% of Afghanistan.
Yes, we can get there in a second. We're still talking about Helmand. The operation is to clear Helmand of Taliban. That would then make it possible to do development, what I've just described as the kind of development that might happen. Do you think that might change the minds of the people in Helmand about the values of development? Now, looking at the rest of the country, the statistic we have is 75 or 70% of the land area of Afghanistan is in the control of the Taliban.
Okay, so let's then speak about what happens after the fighting, assuming that foreign forces succeed in driving out the Taliban from in Operation Khanjar from Helmand. The whole strategy is to secure the area and then hand it over to the police. So, Prince Ali Siraj, let me put this point to you. The Afghan police are actually loathed in many parts of the country for being corrupt. A report just today said that this is not a trusted police force, that there are even incidents where they've been involved in child exploitation.
Well, allow me, let me go back to Mr. Griffiths, please, for a moment about the Kajakai Dam. The Kajakai Dam, there's the district of Kajakai, there was one commander by the name of Mullah Salam. Mullah Salam was in the olden days was a member of the Taliban. When Mullah Omar was defeated, he hung up his guns and he went back to farming. He contacted me. He had 2,000 people, and he was looking for arms to fight against the Taliban. I contacted the NATO generals, and I asked them for help. They refused to help. Mullah Salam eventually
Okay, but Prince Ali, can I just get your views on this particular point? about the Afghan police force, because we've been speaking about the lack of security, about the importance of development in reconstruction, in the battle for the hearts and minds. We hear that phrase a lot. But how is the Afghan police force viewed in the country? Do people trust them?
The people, the kind of police that they have right now, who's getting about maybe $75 a month, he's forced into accepting graft, accepting bribe. But if we start a provincial police where we recruit the police from the provinces, if we do this and we train them and we arm them and we give them a good salary, once we select them from the provinces in the proper Afghan way, then in that case they will not go and harm their own people, because they will have the elders to answer to. They know the enemy from their friend, and they know the terrain. We must follow the Malayan example of 1948 to 1960.
But Prince Ali, these are local. These are Afghan forces. These are local Afghans, and often they've been poorly trained and corrupt. And local people have told our reporters that on occasions they've been involved in sexual assault.
When you say, listen, we have to clarify Afghan. Somebody from Helmand is an Afghan, but somebody from Takhar is also an Afghan. But the one from Takhar is a Tajik. The one from Helmand is a Pashtun. What I'm talking about when I say police force, I'm talking about provincial police. I'm talking like what we attempted to do in Musa Qala when Gerald Thomas was in charge of the British forces at the time, and we brought peace to Musa Qala. I was one of the proponents of that whole Musa Qala initiative. That agreement was signed in my house. So long as that initiative was in effect for 6 months, there
Prince
was no
Ali, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Musa Qala.
but we are running out of time. Zaina, how do Afghans that you've spoken to feel about the slow pace of progress in the country? Do they feel like the government of President Hamid Karzai is on their side?
Well, we went with the governor to Nadali district in central Helmand. We accompanied him, and he was promising the people a new development plan, telling them that their lives will get better and the government will establish a presence and they will clear the territory from the Taliban. There is a police checkpoint just in the center of the city, a kilometer away. It's Taliban land. But people said that if their lives get better, if their development projects, if they find jobs, then people will lay down their arms and there will be peace. People do want peace, people want stability, but it's still a long way to go, and the Taliban is still quite strong in Helmand. Yes, they can raise an Afghan flag in a former Taliban stronghold in Khanashin, but they only control that district, the center of the district. In the remote villages, the Taliban is still so ever present.
And with that in mind, Michael Griffin, if we look ahead to the upcoming Afghan presidential elections in August, given the current level of violence in the southern provinces, is there any way that free and fair elections can be held in 1 month's time?
There may be some delay, I think, in the south. Particularly in Helmand, obviously in Kandahar. That doesn't mean that an election could not be held there. Let me put it this way: the election. I was an election monitor in 2004, and the way it works in Afghanistan, obviously that was a much different spirited election, because it was the first ever. And there's been a lot of disappointment since, and the level of insecurity has risen. What could happen, because there's a very slow pace of counting, this can sometimes take up to a month to count and get a final result. It's possible that the election could take place in Helmand several weeks later without necessarily cancelling out or neutralising the result of the vote nationwide. So one could prepare for that compromise eventuality. I don't think it would render null and void the whole electoral process.
Well, Michael Griffin in London, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Prince Ali Siraj in Kabul, and our correspondent Zaina Khodr also in Kabul. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We, of course, welcome your comments and suggestions. Email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye for now.